Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Project Flux. This is the Spotlight series. This week we are without Yoshi, as anyone who tuned into the weekly pulse earlier will know. And I have a fantastic conversation with Dave Officer, who owns and runs Doodle Juice Design and is also a musician who I have the pleasure of playing with quite regularly. And we discuss all things AI, all things about his career, his journey, and his thoughts on how AI is affecting the creative industry. So a slightly different angle this week, but a really, really interesting conversation. So please sit back, enjoy, and listen to the conversation I was lucky enough to have with Dave Officer from Doodle Juice. Good evening, Dave, and welcome to Project Flux podcast.
Thanks, man. The pleasure is all yours.
It absolutely is.
No. Thanks for having me, man. It's. I was going to say it's a joy, but time will tell. Maybe it'll be.
It will. Well, you can rate it at the end, and you can decide whether it was worth the investment of your time.
I will. A little button will come up, which will let me do that.
But from my perspective, it really is a pleasure to have you on. We've known each other for a long time, and when I started this podcast, I got a lot of good advice from Dave. And for those who don't know, Dave is also the guy that I make fantastic music with. We've been playing in a band together for how many years?
It's 10 years,
which is really scary in itself.
Terrifying, isn't it?
Absolutely. But a very sort of pleasurable 10 years, I have to say.
They have been pretty good, haven't they? I mean, if anybody who isn't in a band, it's incredibly rare to find musicians that you can play with. Like, you're all kind of on the same sort of level. You know, you're still on the same sort of proficiency level with your instruments, but to then find people who are on that level and who you also get on with personality-wise, it's one of the rarest things on earth. So
and for 10 years as well.
And
I don't think we have ever had an argument, as far as
I cannot imagine what we would argue about.
Although there's always time. Let's see where this podcast goes. But the other thing that we have in common, and we talk about a lot, and exactly why I wanted to get you on the podcast, is we've got this kind of mutual appreciation of AI. I won't say love, because I think we can both see some of the challenges and the risks with it, but we spend a lot of time talking about it in the various contexts.
Yes. I'm slightly dubious of anyone who's fully in and anybody who's fully out. You know, like with most things in life, I think anybody who's really evangelical about something and they can't see a single flaw with it, those people should be avoided at all costs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And similarly, like the other way around, like people who are just, AI is the demon, stay away from it. Either of those camps I can't really get on board with. I absolutely love it. I see loads of potential with it, but always with a slight air of trepidation and cynicism, but just like a mildly thin line of both those things.
Yeah, and it's exactly that, trying to get that kind of measured approach, because I can get myself quite excited about some of the technology, and I have to kind of remind myself, hang on, this isn't all good. There are some potential risks here.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about having conversations with you, we've had a lot of people on the spotlights from the project delivery profession, and we're going to talk about your career and what you do in a minute, but you come from a slightly different perspective. But I think that is incredibly important, because it's important to know that the kind of project delivery profession is not the only profession that's grappling with this issue. And in fact, basically every kind of creative or delivery-driven profession is grappling with this issue right now. But before we go into that conversation, just for the listeners' sake, can you tell everyone a little bit about you, about your journey? I know it really, really well, but that journey from, managing a percussion company to what you're doing now with Doodle Juice. I think it'd just be really interesting for everyone to hear what you went through.
Yeah, sure. So I've always been massively into music, massively into art and design. When I was growing up, I was always 100% convinced that art and design was going to be the thing I was going to go into, until I went through school and hated every aspect of school. So every ounce of love that I had for art and design, it ripped it from me. Because I just couldn't get on board with anything that school tried to teach me. So I went through most of my teen years convinced, I was going to get into graphic design and do something like that. I even did work experience in it. I was just gearing up for that being my career until I got to around 17, 18. and completely fell out of love with it. And I thought, no, I can't do this now because
Mhm.
school has made me fall out of love with it. If I go into a career with it, I will absolutely hate everything about it and I will hate my life. So I'm not going to do anything I enjoy. I'm just doing a string of jobs that I detest and be miserable forever. I
Not a good
carried on.
plan.
I carried on that path for like a good 10 years, just doing a string of things I didn't really care about. I then found a job in the drumming world, sort of loosely, because I've been playing drums since I was about 15. Never thought I'd do anything sort of. I never thought it would earn me any money whatsoever. But I saw a job opening at this really cool little percussion company, and they hired out musicians to all the major orchestras. They hired out like any of the weirdest percussion you can conceivably think of. It was pretty much the only place in London, actually mostly Europe, that did a lot of the stuff that we did. It was
I always
you
remember
couldn't.
the gong.
Yeah, because I drove that to Berlin once. So we had the largest commercially available gong on the planet. It's like 80 inches in diameter. This
Mhm.
thing could make an entire building rumble, and it's you'll have heard it on many famous film scores because this it's so sort of hard to find. Um, and because it's not available anywhere else, like we've driven it to some of the weird places. So I've driven it to Germany for the um, Berlin, symphony orchestra to play,
Mhm.
and that piece I think it's hit like once, but they pay for a driver to drive it from London to Germany for one night's performance and then back again.
Wow,
Insane,
the return on investment on that one hit.
mental, right? One hit
Yeah.
wonder. So that was mental. So yeah, so I worked in that company for a while. It was great. We set up rehearsal studios. We worked with some really cool. We had some really really cool musical acts come into the studios. We went to really cool venues around London. We set up a shop. Like it was a cool little place, but it wasn't mine. And I was doing lots of design for that company. And the more that I did it, the more I started doing it on the side of the job, and I started to earn money for it. And I thought I could actually do this. If I did it for myself, I think I could set it up in such a way that I won't detest it or
Yeah.
myself or everything else around me. So after sort of tentatively dipping my toe into working for myself for a number of years outside of a stable job, I built up enough confidence to say to myself, you know what? I think I need something that's mine. I'm a bit of a weird sort of controlly person when it comes to my creative stuff. So I really want something that's mine. I've got to try this. If I don't do it, I'll never forgive myself. So I took the plunge almost 6 years ago, and have been doing design and illustration for myself full time ever since then. And it's been great. I've
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed it. So what is happening in the AI world is completely shaking up my industry, and pretty much everybody in my industry detests it. I'm one of the very, very, very few people that I've spoken to, certainly, that is quite open to where it's going to take us, because it's being seen mostly negatively by people in my world, anyway.
Yeah. And I remember distinctly when you kind of made that decision to transition, and what you've managed to achieve is really incredible, and you've got a huge following as well. And I think that's testament to the kind of the work you've done and your use of social media. I mean, for the listeners, you've got, so is it 25,000 LinkedIn followers and however many 100,000 TikTok followers?
Yeah, something
So
like that. Yeah, TikTok's a weird one. TikTok is not the one I expected to be the
yeah.
popular one, but it's been all right.
But that use of social media to sort of spread your brand has been, really inspiring actually. And in some ways, it's inspired me to do what I do. And the fact that we're friends and we play in a band together, I could see what you did, and it was so natural and organic. It wasn't forced, and
Mm.
I think that was really, really impressive. But now you've got yourself into this position where you've got a very comfortable kind of position. You're well respected in the industry. You're doing fantastic. But now we've got to grapple with what's happening with AI. So, in terms of AI in the creative process, you've mentioned that there's a lot of people in this industry who detest it. I would say it's probably similar in the project delivery profession, probably less detest, more kind of fear or fingers in the ears, head in the sand kind of mentality.
Yeah.
But in terms of some of the tools that you use, for instance, I know that you use Adobe's Photoshop a lot, and I've seen the changes that they've made with the Gen AI functionality. As this is becoming more prevalent in those packages in design, how are you incorporating AI into the creative process?
So it's in the I'm using it for the dull stuff, and we've had this conversation as well. So um, so imagine I use this as an example quite a lot because I remember this vividly from about 4 or 5 years ago because it was the worst way to spend an afternoon. So you imagine a photograph of a motorcycle, right, and all its little intricate details, and if you wanted to separate an image like that from its background, it used to be the most tedious task imaginable. Imagine going around every single line of a motorbike with a pencil, every spoke in the wheel, every bump in the tire, every little grid suspension, all of the stuff. You can tell I know a lot about engineering. All those little bits in the middle. So you're kind of like going, so you're doing that digitally with what is called the pen tool, and you're going around every little nook and cranny of a bike just to separate it from its background. That used to take the best part of it. I remember one really intricate photo I did one time. It just took hours and hours and hours to do this very simple task. Right today, I can do it with one click of a button, pretty much. And yeah, it's not always right, and sometimes it needs tidying up. But it's the time it saved me is just invaluable. So like with that one task alone, I can never be truly upset with AI because it's given me my life back with like mundane tasks like that. There's loads of little things. So there's generative expand and generative fill are two functions in Photoshop now. So for example, if
That's what I've seen at generative fill, I think.
yeah. So it's just the best. So if you imagine I take a photo with my phone and it's in portrait mode, right? And I've got this wonderful photo, but all of a sudden I'm working with an image that needs to be landscape. So imagine I've just taken the photo of a field and I've got this portrait image. Now what I would have used to have to do is just expand that image to fill out the vertical side, and then obviously you'd lose what was at the top and the bottom of it because it was this sort of tall portrait image. Now I can just put that portrait image in the middle of my landscaped canvas, and I've got these two blank areas on either side, and I can just hit generative fill or generative expand, and AI will look at the image, will understand what should be at either end of that, and fill it, and will do it so well that
And how much time does that save you?
Oh,
Like that click?
God, man, it's incalculable. It's amazing. It is doing jobs. I didn't actually realize how often I do things like that until I got to the stage where I was just clicking generative fill multiple times a day and go, my God, this is saving me an insane amount of time. So there's little jobs like that are coming along that are just insane. There's a lot of I think the reason AI's got quite a bad rap at the minute with a lot of people is a lot of businesses are trying to shoehorn AI functionality into everything that they do just to be seen to be doing it. It's almost like
Tick a box.
yeah, it's almost like look, we're one of the cool kids. We've got it too. What we've done is almost unusable, but we've managed to say we're using AI. Like that horrific function that is now on LinkedIn, which I'm sure you've seen.
Yeah.
You see it, and it suggests what your comment should be if you want to engage with people.
But how do they get it so wrong? I mean, they're owned by Microsoft, who own OpenAI. I don't understand how they could have got that so wrong.
I don't know. I don't know, but it is the worst. And I can't imagine when you look at some of those sort of auto-generated prompts that are that are there to get you to start a conversation. If you started a conversation like that, it's like if you did that in reality, everyone would leave the room because you would just be the dullest human imaginable. But they're just rushing and shoehorning things in to be seen to be doing them, and that's not benefiting anybody. And Adobe are guilty of that as well because there is a lot of stuff there's really good stuff that I've just mentioned, but there's a lot of sort of
it's like you've got to find a diamond, haven't you? There's a lot of rubbish out there, like you say. Some of it's not even AI; it's just some kind of functionality that they're saying is AI driven.
Yeah.
But when you find that real one, like the one you've talked about, and the one that I was aware of was where you go generative fill and it was a cyclist on the road and it said put a yellow line in. It puts the yellow line across the middle of that's the one I've seen. Yeah. But that is game changing stuff. It takes away that grunt work that you have to do, but you don't really want to be doing. And then presumably, Dave, you can then use that time you save to add real value to your clients.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that we've talked about before is the reason that I am quite an advocate of it. The reason that I'm staying quite positive about it is I'm not letting myself use it for anything that I already really enjoy doing. Because because I saw pretty early on. So a massive part of my job is I'll have consultancy calls with people and they'll just want to come up with creative ideas, or I will be in charge of rebranding a business. So they'll need to come up with a logo, they'll need to come up with their colors, their fonts, this whole visual identity. And I adore doing stuff like that, but I adore doing it down to the first part of the process, which is me looking at a blank sheet of paper in front of me and all the notes I've taken from a discovery call with them, and piecing everything they've just said piecing all the bits they've just said with me, and trying to create a visual around it that tells a story that really builds this picture of their brand and what it means. And I'm starting with just a pencil and a piece of paper, and I might sit and look at that page for hours, and I might start sketching stuff and come up with absolute crap. And that might take me hours, and I might get nowhere. I sometimes have days where I get really frustrated and nothing happens, and you just create crap and you throw everything aside, and you say, I can't do this today. I've got nothing in the tank. I'm going to hit it with fresh eyes again tomorrow. And then sometimes you just hit it with fresh eyes, and then something clicks. But the joy of going through all of the pain and the crap to get to that one little moment of clarity where everything kind of comes together and you go, damn, that's a good idea. And the fact that you've gone through that, and then when you present that, you've got the story of how you came to that idea. You build up all of the shit versions that you came up with to get to the good one as part of the story as to how this thing came to be in the first place. It's this dirty process that no one can really understand, which makes it sort of magical. And then you present it, and then when you get something that the client just absolutely loves, it's brilliant. And to take all of that away, even if it would be quicker or more efficient, I'm just not going to do, because that's the joy in me doing what I do.
And do you think that's why so many people in your industry are so anti it? Because they think this is going to take away what we do, which is being creative, and it's going to take away your unique artistic style.
Yes. Yeah. That's the concern. I mean, the main concern is, please don't stop me from being able to earn money doing something I enjoy. I totally understand, because it's a very, very nice, privileged position to be in, and it's something I, for one, have worked my little legs off to get to a position that I can now do. So
I think that's the same everywhere. You've got people in, say, the project delivery profession, say engineers who have spent 7-10 years going through different educations to get to that stage of their career. And they're having the exact same thought process, which is something might take away or might replace me. So it's a perfectly human response in some ways to kind of say, no, keep this away from me because I built this up, but for maybe slightly different reasons. But just going back to what you were talking about, that kind of writer's block phase, and that can happen in any industry. That kind of, you sit there and you can't get an idea out. Have you ever used, or would you ever use, AI to help you release that writer's block? Like, for instance, using ChatGPT or a large language model to help you come up with initial ideas, or is that a no-no for you?
So I can't lie to you. It's a no-no now, but it wasn't. I've definitely done it, because I think it'd be stupid to pretend that I hadn't, because I think the curiosity of just how good is this thing, and I'll be completely honest with you, as the new iterations come out, I will probably dip into it again, just again out of morbid curiosity. I'm so confident now that there's certain aspects of my job I don't want it involved with, because I don't want it to take away that thing that makes it quite special. And and I know that'll happen, because I did start to use it for coming up with ideas. I did get to a point where I thought, let me see if I can get this to think of. So for example, I like to come up with word maps when I'm starting to come up with the logos and branding ideas. So I'll sit on a call with someone, we'll go through everything to do with their business, why they're looking at rebranding, who their target market is, who their competitors are, a whole myriad of different things. And once I've got a ton of little words picked out from their story about why they started it, where they are now, where they want to go, all that kind of stuff, I'll take loads of those words and sit them down and then branch off with loads of words until I can picture some sort of visual story that I can then apply to. That's a very manual process, but I did try ChatGPT quite a few times to say, right, here is the transcript from that call. Create me a word map from everything that sticks out. Then think of some visuals for what could go along with that, and blah blah blah. So I was trying to build up this little thing, And it came up with some stuff, and off the back of that, I then came up with some different stuff. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. That saved me some time.
Yeah. It
And I went
started
through
with
the
the
process.
process.
Yeah. And I went through the process and came up with something that was fine and I was happy with, and I delivered the project and it was grand. But I felt a bit empty afterwards.
A bit dirty.
Yeah, I felt a bit dirty. Yeah. And I'll tell you what the real pincher was. There was a point last year that I went completely blank idea. Like I went really dry. So it happens. Everybody gets dry from time to time. I go through this process which I've been doing for years, which is writing down 10 ideas a day, right? So I got a notepad, and every single day at the start of the day, this isn't even in shot, I'll write down 10 ideas, and that's like the first thing I do. And it's one of those things that just keeps my mind sharp and it helps me stay creative. I stopped doing that for a while last year, and I had started relying on ChatGPT to think of ideas. I hadn't even been doing it for long, maybe a month, not very long. Yeah. But I already noticed it's like I'd stopped training this muscle, and all I had to do was stop training it for a month, and it was already starting to become this sort of weak, fatigued, droopy thing that was just dry. And I could sense it happen. It happened really, really fast for me. And it was at that point I was like, whoa. Okay, I don't like this. I think I know why this is happening. I got straight into doing this again. I did a
good old manual notebook as well.
There's something about this being like a tactile thing as well, which I think helps. Got straight back into that again, and then felt the juices bubbling up again. So I don't want.
It can make us lazy, can't it? And I think this is you said that jokingly about you felt empty or a little bit dirty, and I've noticed that people sometimes will not admit to using it. They feel like it's a bit of a secret, and they don't want to kind of admit that they use it. And you're kind of saying it's okay, everyone's starting to use this stuff now, but there is a kind of a response to it, which is usually when something's too easy or too good to be true, you don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
And the fact that you actually notice your own cognitive abilities being affected by the fact that you were not exercising that part of your creative brain, that's incredibly interesting. I haven't seen any other studies on that yet, but I bet there'll be more coming out in due course.
Yeah, I noticed it fast. Really fast, and don't get me wrong, I do use it for things. I still use it because I think it's great. Like for example, I wanted to build a list of all the different creative thinking techniques that exist, so I could then build a little library of those and start studying those. And ChatGPT helped give me a list of 500 of them, taken out of some of the best-selling books, so the most read blog articles and all that kind of stuff. It helped me compile a massive list, which I can then go and research further and build my own little structures and stuff. If I want to, there was a web design build I was doing recently, and the client had given me the copy, and all the copy for the site they had written, we do this. But I can't stand that. It should be about you. You're talking to your customers. Everything should be about them. So I asked ChatGPT to reword everything so it wasn't we and it was all about the reader. Yeah. And put in the same copy, and bang, done faster than I could have ever imagined doing it. And then I was able to put it into the site and it was worded better. So for like things like that, it's brilliant. And also, I think a lot of the reasons people in my industry are quite apprehensive about this technology is that it's making our skills almost entirely redundant. So all of the software that I have grown up learning, so Photoshop's a big one for me. I first got my paws on Photoshop in 1996. So I've been using it for a while. There's Adobe Photoshop, there's Adobe Illustrator. I've spent decades on those programs. All of the skills that I've built up, which are now incredibly valuable, in a couple of years will be almost entirely useless. And that scares the crap out of people. So my value as a creative will be less about what I can do and more about what I can think. It's all of the techniques I've built, coming up with ideas for things that I will then eventually go on to design and draw and all that kind of stuff. That's where my value is now. That's where my value is going to be, which is another reason the second that I thought I'm outsourcing the only thing that that has value for me in a couple of years, I'm outsourcing that to the AI. That's dangerous. I need to stop that. So that's another reason I quickly stopped relying on it for idea generation, because that's the
Yeah.
thing. That's where my value is going to lie soon.
Yeah. And I think that's the same for every industry, as we were talking about. We've got a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are project delivery. And I think it's the exact same thing. A client, for instance, whether it's, doing what you were saying about using that pencil to go around that wheel, or whether it's someone doing a schedule or a cost plan for a project, that's not what the client is paying for. The client is paying for the value that you add from that.
Yeah.
So the ability to be creative and to take some of that time away from doing that grunt, I call it the grunt work, the stuff that you just got to do to get to the answer, and then you can add value.
Yeah.
I think it's exactly the same. And I think, people just need to look at AI as it currently is in a measured way, that it's neither perfect, nor is it something that you've got to avoid. You've got to look at it and you've got to say, right, exactly as you just said, Dave, it's good for these things. I'm not going to let it interfere with these things. The only thing I would say, so where do you think this is going, right? Because we're going to talk on the Spotlight, which is published on Friday, about what OpenAI have talked around the 5 steps to what they call AGI. So at the moment, I think you're right. There's certain things that this technology can't do, but that's not going to last forever. We know that. With the rate of change in maybe a couple of years' time, it might be better than us, even at the creative tasks. So what happens and how do we deal with that as a species, I suppose, more than just as you as a designer or me as a project professional? It's a wider question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a tricky one, because there's so much joy in the creative process, but that's only for the people who are creative. So like everybody has their own sort of brand. It might be in like my mum's way of being creative is in clever ways. She will think of, and this is going to sound terrible, but I love her to bits.
You know what you're going to say.
It's sound terrible, but I love her to bits, and this is how she's wired. But she is retired now. She's in her 80s, and she gets all of her joy now from just keeping the house immaculate, right? And so she has found loads of creative ways in which to save her time in doing that. I ever go into my parents' house, right? And it's like it hasn't been touched. She keeps it like a palace. It's ridiculous. You don't feel comfortable being in there. Everything's so.
I am in Belfast in a few months. Maybe
you should drop in. I'll let her know that you're going to be close. You should drop in just so you feel uncomfortable. Just so you know what it's like to see a room with 0 dust in it. It's very strange. But anyway, that's where her joy is now. It's like, she hasn't she's been retired for like 20 years, and her joy is in keeping a very nice house, and good on her, right? Yeah. But she will. I guarantee you, my mum can get her house clean in a fraction of the time I can, and I'm half her age, because she will have thought, some people are creative in their own different ways.
Yeah, of course.
Some people don't get the joy out of the process that I get, and they'll want those little shortcuts, and they should. So this is why I don't have a problem with it, because I think it's very, very hypocritical to have a problem with it. Detest something that I think you quite enjoy. So, for example, if I had to put a spreadsheet together, right? I can't think of anything worse, personally.
Oh, I love a good spreadsheet.
You love a spreadsheet, right? I know that, right? So if a technology is being developed that allows me to not spend any time on creating a spreadsheet, then I'm going to celebrate that. You wouldn't, because that's taking away something you've built a skill in, something you quite enjoy. But I shouldn't have the power to vote that thing down just because. Oh, sorry, you shouldn't have the power to put that thing down just because it doesn't work for you, but it works for you.
Yeah, because it basically levels everything up, doesn't it? So the tasks are the things that, maybe you weren't so good at creating a spreadsheet, you can use AI to do that. And likewise, I can get myself to a certain competence of designing by using things like Canva, even though I'm terrible at designing, just good enough to get a job done that I otherwise would not want to get done. I think that's what it's doing. It's just leveling everyone up to a certain level of average competence. Yeah. But you're still going to need the special people to go above and beyond that for now. Yeah. For now, until we get to Skynet territory.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of. I've only just thought of this, so I haven't fleshed it out. So forgive me if it's got loads of holes. It's kind of like CGI in movies, right? Started off incredibly expensive, very hard to do. Only a few people were doing it. Very few people were doing it well. And now CGI is in most films, but there's still a lot of people that just don't like CGI in films. They've never liked it. And then there's also some people who are fatigued with it being used everywhere, and don't like to see it used very much now. And I think this might go in a similar sort of vein.
Yeah.
It'll
Yeah.
it's going to be used absolutely everywhere for a while, and then we'll all get a little bit fatigued with it. You'll be like, can we just use it for these
Well,
things?
I've said a few times, I don't think it's going to be too long until we have the kind of the against model where people start saying this is built without any AI,
Yeah,
fully human. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's definitely coming within the next, probably I reckon within the next year or so.
It might
Actually,
not take
because,
that long, right? It might not take
yeah,
that long.
the hype is already starting to get a little bit fatigued, and people have heard a lot about it. So it's going to be interesting. But I sent a LinkedIn post not long ago after we got back from our little session that we had when we did that songwriting little retreat that we had,
Yeah,
and exactly what I said. It was the process that we went through that was so enjoyable. It wasn't the fact that I still what we actually come up with I think is pretty good, but that's kind of besides the point.
yeah.
Even if what we came
Even
up
if
with
it
was
wasn't,
rubbish,
we still would have had the same enjoyable experience.
exactly,
If we come
because
back
that's
and
what we
listen
wanted
to,
to do.
if we'd listened to every song after that and gone, geez, we came up with some absolute dross, we still would have had 3 days of just an
Yeah,
absolute blast.
exactly.
That's almost like it's not the point of going. It's just like a nice bonus
Yeah,
that we
so
get at the end.
that's the human element, isn't it? That
Yeah,
we've got to sort of retain somehow. Even though we did end up, and this is a story for another episode, but we did end up doing something pretty cool with AI,
yeah.
which
Which is
which
going to
we'll
sound
not want to do
ridiculous based on what we've just talked about, but we tried a little experiment where we would sort of duet with it.
So we will make that available pretty soon. We're working on polishing that off as we speak. But as you said, it wouldn't have mattered if that had turned out to be absolute rubbish because it was the process. So I think what people have got to find that what you've said a lot in this conversation, Dave, joy. You've used the word joy, and that's the bit that we've got to retain as a species. Doesn't matter what we're doing, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a designer, whether you're a lawyer. There is a part of why you got into that industry in the first place, why you went to school or why you went to university or why you went to college to learn that craft is because something brought you to it, which means that there was a certain element of joy there. And that's the bit that we do not want to give up. So I think you've articulated that incredibly well. And we could go on talking for a long, long time, but we're going to sort of have to wrap it up pretty soon because we're reaching that sort of half-hour mark. But before we do, Dave, any sort of final words from you?
I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? So there was a thought I had earlier on today, actually, and I'm gonna throw this out to the ether to all my creative friends who are sort of staunchly against it, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that the data for it feels like it's been sort of unethically mined. It's being trained on work that I have created. It's being trained on work loads of other people have created without any sort of consent from us or any sort of compensation coming our way. And that just inherently feels wrong. And that's why everybody's got a big problem with it. And I do get that. And I had this weird little feeling earlier on. This weird little thought popped into my head was if we transferred the same sort of thinking into medicine, right? So all of the work that has been done to research how to fight disease, and you imagine something like Alzheimer's or cancer and all the different work people have done making progress in all those fields. And if all of that data could be grabbed and fed into an algorithm that could then figure out how to make all that stuff work, none of us would have a problem with it. And the guys who did that work would never have a problem with that because it would be trying to get us all to a better place.
Yeah, it's for the greater good.
It's for the greater good. And so I was trying to think of, is there a parallel there with the creative industry? So,
well, you've got the Creative Commons, haven't you? There is a lot of people who create software and create things which is for public consumption.
Well, that's the thing. So the problem is, as soon as you put any of your work in the public domain, if you put something on Instagram, then you've kind of, to a certain extent, lost a bit of the rights of that because it's gone public. Absolutely. And any bugger can get an idea off it and rip it off to a certain extent a little bit. If we are putting all of our work into this sort of giant smelting pot that can then be trained and create its own little things, It's going to allow future generations of kids and stuff to just, as soon as they have the idea, they can create it. Loads of people who possibly have really, really good ideas, but never have the ability to think of them. Because you imagine how many people are really good. So Michael Jackson's a good example. Sorry, I'm going off on mega tangents here. Michael Jackson's a good example of this. He couldn't play any instruments, right? But he was responsible for a lot of the melodies and a lot of the hooks on his songs, because he would sit with Quincy Jones and go boom, 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 and Quincy Jones would be like, oh, that's a good hook, and he'd write the song, but he didn't know how to play. And there's so many people like that. They don't know how to play, but they have the ideas. And with tools like this, they'll be able to create the things, and giving them the ability to do that feels like a cool thing as well. So I don't know if it's something we should be too precious about, but I also do understand that it's a mega evil world of massive corporations that are all trying to make billions of pounds off stealing people's work for no money. So that is also wrong. So I'm conflicted.
It is a very conflicted position at the moment, and you're seeing it happen with things like Udio, is it, the music generation one, where they're saying that it's not been trained on all the music, but of course it has.
It has to have been.
Exactly. So I think in some ways it's something that we're just going to have to get used to, and the very fact that the internet, when you put stuff up onto the internet, it's there. It's there for public consumption. You're putting it out into the world. And that's basically what a lot of these models have been trained on. There's never anything for free in this world. We got the internet for free, but was it really free? What we basically got was we spent 20 years feeding, or more than that, 30 years feeding a machine to train a load of models. The question is, was that all part of the plan?
Hey, that's another thing that I think to myself, because social media has been massively instrumental for me being able to work for myself. It's given me this massive audience that I can put content out. I can suddenly be seen by millions of people, and then out of those people, a certain percentage will like what they see, and they'll approach me and work with me. And it's amazing. And I don't pay for that. I don't pay for that at all. I've just been giving this massive broadcasting tool that I don't pay for. So that's so because of that, I'm also like, what? Train your thing on my stuff. You've got what you wanted out of it. You put all your information onto a platform that's owned by Microsoft, that also owns 49% of the largest large language model in the world. So it's one big circle. Yeah. You're right. I think we'll leave everyone to ponder on that. And it'd be great to have you back, Dave. Maybe when we reach the next stage of AGI, you can see how that has impacted you. But I tell you what, when the next GPT goes live, maybe we should go live and try and get it to come up with some ideas for us. Let's do it. That sounds like a day. And what would be really good is if you're going to get some of this out to your LinkedIn audience, maybe some kind of a poll to find out what people really think, because I think there's a lot of hearsay, but I've done a lot of polls within sort of project delivery industry, but to find out what creative people are actually thinking, how bad is it, how many people are against it, will be quite interesting to see where this goes. Definitely the vast majority of it. How is it? 90%, 95%? It's up there. It's up there. Yeah. But thank you so much, Dave. It's been a pleasure. It's always love talking to you, but anytime. Or this podcast has been even better. We'll see you all next week. Next week we have Del Foon from Movar on the show, where we'll be talking about his podcast, Project Chatter. So until then, have a fantastic week, everyone. Bye-bye, Dave. Toodaloo.
If you guys did enjoy this podcast today, please don't forget to like, comment, and also give us a rating so other like-minded people can also see. And all of our podcasts are formed upon the newsletter we send out. So if you can subscribe to that too, you'll get all the information a day earlier, and you'll get all the information when it's ready off the press.